Today's throwback, why we're having a look at the Mezco Cinema of Fear Series 2 Freddy Krueger. One of the earlier ways, if you really technically exclude the movie Maniacs from Todd McFarlane, one of the earlier Freddy Kruegers that we had gotten, there are elements obviously to this Freddy, not really necessarily a big fan, but other elements I do like. Obviously it paved the way for some of the Freddys that we got now from NECA. But one of the reasons why I wanted to go back and redo this review was simply just because I felt like some of these older figures kind of needed a new take on them. For starters, I think one thing that a lot of fans, and certainly myself, even at the point that I had bought this Freddy, all initially felt was, this Freddy feels really, really short. I guess in comparison, he is a much shorter character, but this figure definitely is a very short interpretation of Freddy Krueger. You can see that he is slightly pre-posed. His legs, very similar to what NECA does now. His legs have no articulation whatsoever, they're just sculpted pants. Now he doesn't have all the bells and whistles that the NECA Freddy has necessarily, but he does have his own accessories, some of which actually did not get recreated in the NECA versions. Well, for starters, before we actually do that, let's have a look at his face. It does look like Freddy, but I would say a much more simplified, stylistic version of Freddy. I think the details are certainly done well. He's got this really sinister grin. Would I say it necessarily looks like Robert? No. No, it wouldn't. But, you know, just as Freddy, like a comic style Freddy, I would say this more so looks like. You can still see that there's the gashes are there, and the paint I think is really nicely done. His ears all chewed up, and I think his fedora looks pretty solid. You can take the fedora off, like so, and you can see a lot more of those details in the burns going on there. For one reason or another, I find the weaker end of the figure is actually his fedora. Without the fedora, he actually looks really good. Somehow the fedora on him just, I think, makes him a little more cartoony. But yeah, I think they did definitely a good job on his face. There's a better close-up look on his face. He's looking down at something. What it is, I have no idea. It would have to be something shorter than him. And there's probably very few things shorter than this Freddy figure. He does have his glove. The blades aren't as sharp on his glove here as some of the other Freddys, but much more durable. Very unlikely that these blades are going to break, which is nice. The paint is done pretty good on his claw, on his glove. Freddy has no stripes obviously on his sleeves, but he has stripes on his chest. You'll notice the top half here, Freddy, color-wise looks a little different than this bottom half here. This bottom half here also has a bit of a gloss to it, which the top half does not have. But he's got some nice paint, extra paint going on in the pants there also. Now, in the way of his other accessories, I don't know how long this review necessarily will be, but we'll get this out of the way. In the way of his other accessories, he does come with the top of a garbage can lid from the alleyway there. The smaller Freddy, the 3 3/4 inch Freddy that also came from Mezco, came with the exact same garbage can, just a little bit smaller. So there you go. Other accessories he does come with. Just get him to stand. Standing with this Freddy a little trickier because he kind of just leans forward like so. But he does also come with his skull face. Not one of the better ones. I don't want to compare. Well, I would be comparing it, I guess, apples to apples, but I really don't want to compare Mezco's because they are an older figure to the newer NECA Freddys, because those, obviously, they've had time to perfect the sculpt. I don't think the skull works as well in Mezco's version as it does with the NECA version. but it's nice. I have yet to ever interchange the skull face, the skinless face of Freddy. I've yet to actually replace him with any of the Freddy figures, and that's even with the NECA figures. It's a nice added accessory, but I mean, really, I like a definitive Freddy figure. I don't necessarily consider that to be a good head that I would swap out. But it's just a peg. It's just a peg hole, and it actually sits on a. He actually has a ball jointed head. So popping it off, putting it back on, no problem right there. And then also he does have an interchangeable hand with the severed fingers. So he's cutting his fingers off and all the delicious goodness coming out of his fingers. The one thing, this Freddy doesn't have as much of a problem changing out the hands, but some of the later released figures, trying to go back and do some of the throwbacks on the older figures, but some of them have really, really fine pegs. Very, very problematic for breaking off. This one is a much bigger peg. You're less likely to break this off, so I like that. I like that aspect of it. Would I necessarily have him displayed with that? Probably not either. But it's nice that he does include that. Lastly, though, the really cool accessory that actually NECA has really yet to do. Now, NECA has done an open chest Freddy. I really like, though, what Mezco did, and I don't know if this kind of idea will ever carry over to future figures, but with Freddy, as I mentioned before, you can see that he has a different change in color here from the top to the bottom. You can actually take the bottom half of his shirt, of his sweater, you can take it right off. It doesn't, there's no magnets, there's no peg or anything like that. It just kind of sticks by friction, I suppose. You can just take it off, and there you have his exposed chest. Again, a little more cartoony, but one thing you also get, though, is this. Really, really neat. Now, what do you do with this? Well, the hardest part is just trying to figure out which end it is. Just look for the part that has the end of the sweater. Obviously, that will go on the bottom. But you'll take that and you'll peg it into place like so, and you have Freddy lifting up his shirt. Now, what you can do, it takes some manipulation, but you can actually bend the hand and arm in such a way that it looks like he's holding up his shirt, exposing all the details and gruesomeness underneath. That is a nice touch that even today still trumps NECA's designs, some of NECA's ideas. So I like that. I like that quite a bit. In fact, I think when I had this Freddy on display, I don't have him on display anymore, but when I had him on display, I actually had him displayed with the, I don't know if I actually had the fedora on, I can't really remember, but I did have him with this alternate shirt piece. I think that's such a neat idea. Now, in the way of his articulation, Freddy, as I mentioned before, has a ball jointed head, but it's actually in the neck area where the ball joint sits. His shoulders rotate all the way around. They actually don't peg out or anything like that, but he does have a hinge in the elbow. His hands rotate and they hinge slightly as well, this one more so. And then he has a waist swivel. The funny thing about it is actually he swivels below the belt. He doesn't actually swivel above the belt like you would almost expect. Likely again due to the fact that where his sweater needs to be, they had to put the articulation a little lower. Aside from that, he has no articulation in the feet, sadly, but there you go. There is Freddy. As I mentioned, Spot had mentioned, I want to go back and do a couple of these throwbacks. Looking at some of these figures that I had from my initial collection, if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that these are some of the older figures that I've reviewed too. So it gives me a chance to kind of go back, do them in true high def. Woo, high def. And also too, even though we've gotten NECAs and NECAs, you know, a little bit nicer in design, a little more detailed, you still kind of got to have love for the simplicity, much more stylistic Freddy here that came to us from Mezco. Mezco Cinema Fear. Well, I'm going to give him, this was Series 2, by the way, I'm going to give Freddy here, I think I'm going to give him a 6. Kind of like what I said for, I also did a throwback on Part 3 Jason. Kind of the same thing I said for Jason, I'm going to say for Freddy here. He is not the most movie accurate design of Freddy. He doesn't really look like the actor, but there's a certain kind of cartoon, comic book kind of design to him, kind of that vibe that I'm digging. And for that reason, he just has a nice charm to him. So even though we've gotten newer Freddy figures, I would definitely say don't overlook this guy. This guy needs some love too. Today's throwback, again, we're having a look at the Mezco Cinema Fear Series 2 Freddy Krueger. Certainly thanks for watching, guys. See you guys next time.